Hello, my name is Ivan Aguirre. I work for the Glen Avon Library. I'm here today to present a Book to Action program. Today's program is a higher education panel. So this panel contains higher education staff that work with underserved, underrepresented students, and they're here today to speak on their journeys in higher education and the many things affecting minority students today. So without further ado, I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Angelica Tran. I am currently the Assistant Director for a TRIO program at San Jose State by the name of Aspire. And I work with first generation students going to college. And our main focus with the program is retention tools. So we guide our students through the process to make sure they get to their goal of graduation and beyond.
My name is Diana Felix, and I am from Mount San Antonio College, also known as Mount SAC, which is a two-year community college. And I work with the Student Support Services Program, which is a TRIO federally funded program. And we work with low-income students, first-generation college students, to help them assist them in the transfer process from a two-year college to a four-year university, and everything from retention, persistence, and assuring that they understand how to navigate the next system of higher education, which is the four-year university.
My name is David Chavez. I'm a professor of psychology at Cal State University San Bernardino. And Cal State San Bernardino is federally identified as a Hispanic serving institution, as are most of the Cal States, I think. And so we get to work with a lot of very competent, very qualified individuals who are coming from various underrepresented populations.
Thank you all for being here today and being a part of this program. This may be a redundant question, but my first question is, what populations do you currently work with? And if you're part of a special program like Student Support Services, or if you run any labs, go ahead and explain what they are.
Working with Student Support Services, it's a federally funded program that's nationwide. Ours at our institution at San Jose State is one of the older grants. We've been around since 1978. And our main focus is retention with our students and providing a foundation for our students to come ask questions, inquire about just how to get a network connections, resources on campus to help them reach their academic goals, graduation. But beyond that, we also have a sister program housed in the institution by the name of McNair. McNair focuses on those students that are also first-gen, low-income, that want to pursue higher education, in particular PhD. And with those students, the focus of the program at McNair is to get them research ready while they're still an undergraduate student. So they do conduct research, they publish that research, they work with a mentor, they present that research. So by the time they graduate San Jose State, they are competitive applicant with other students that are also applying to PhD programs. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
We are also part of the TRIO programs, Student Support Services specifically, SSSP, and we named ourselves ACES program, which stands for Achieving in College Ensuring Success. So we work with first generation college students, meaning mom, dad, legal guardian does not have a four-year degree from this country, and we help them understand the system of higher education at Mount SAC specifically, because they are first generation college students. Many of our students don't have anyone that they could turn to guide them in navigating the system of higher education. So we work with students who to understand Mount SAC specifically, which is your college, but also beyond Mount SAC, right, at the four-year university, helping them with everything from transferring from graduating from Mount SAC, meaning they attain an associate's degree or an AST degree from our institution, but helping them with that transfer process. So they are successful at both institutions is our goal, right? That they are successful at Mount SAC, two-year university, but also beyond Mount SAC. So the requirements is, they have to receive some financial aid to be considered low income on our campus, and also be first generation college student. And again, we really help them navigate the system of higher education.
Hi, I'm a college professor, as I was saying. So I primarily work with undergrads and graduate students who are psychology students. And so again, I happen to be the director of our clinical program as well. So a lot of students who are in psychology have long-term aspirations of being therapists, essentially. And so my role is to work with undergrads and a wide range of undergrads who are interested in psychology as a field of study. Um, I happen to work with a lot of people who have clinical interests, and then ultimately help run the program that essentially trains people to be therapists. A real interest of mine is something called community-based participatory research. And so over the years, I've been partnering with various community organizations. Um, Actually, I know Ivan because he helps to work with uh, kids who are who live in a public housing complex and attend the Boys and Girls Club that's situated within the public housing complex in downtown San Bernardino. So I work with a lot of a lot of students, those young students who are working with the youth themselves to both be mentors, to put into place programming that will help them to hopefully have more success in their lives as well. I'll also put in a plug while I haven't been, I've never worked for any TRIO programs. I've worked with a number of students as a faculty mentor of students both within, I guess most formally as McNair students who have gone on for doctorates and some of whom are my colleagues today. And also just more generally parts of other TRIO programs, SAIL, et cetera, that have helped to support the students who have great potential, and I've always enjoyed that.
This next question's a bit of a big question, but it's one that I believe a lot of people are interested in, and it is, why are you who you are today? Kind of what brought you to your chosen career path or cause?
What do I do? Why do I do it? Honestly, I am that first generation low income student that was lost in the pipeline at the beginning. I was navigating by myself, going to college and sorting through career paths. And I was pretty lost my first year. And then I was fortunate enough to come across TRIO as a student, and I became a participant. And that started 19 years ago. And I never left because I really found the passion to give back to my community. And I found the best vessel for me was through TRIO, because I see the students that come through my office that resembled that student I was many years ago. And I felt like that was the best way for me to give back and help. It took some time. It took some convincing to convince myself that I was going to be a counselor. Even going to grad school, I encountered situations where I felt like that imposter syndrome. But in the end, I feel like all that just really made me feel confident that I was in the right field to help my students, because I felt what it was to be in their shoes. And that way there's a common ground with my students. So I definitely love what I do. Like I said, I've been full-time working with the program 17 years. And I love it. I don't realize how long it's been until I talk about it, because I love what I do. So that's how I ended up doing what I do.
Very similar to Angelica's journey. I am one of our students, right? I am the oldest out of 5 children. And both of my parents, they both immigrated from Mexico, and I was born here. And they both emphasized the importance of attaining a higher education since I was young, right? I'm the oldest out of 5. So I got the message from them very early on in my childhood, or early in school. But whenever I would ask how, they would say, I don't know, me, have figured out. And a lot of it, so they taught me how to be resourceful, how to ask questions. And that's exactly what I did. And I was a student in 1999 at Mount SAC. Confused, scared, lost, everything. But I kind of remembered always asking those questions. Unfortunately, at the time, we have a TRIO, Student Support Services, on our campus at Mount SAC. But, I was fortunate enough to join other programs like the Bridge program that is still active and there at Mount SAC. And through that program, I was able to find resources and mentors that guided me through not only my time at Mount SAC, but beyond. And I'm not only the oldest out of my family, my family of 7, right, my siblings, but I'm also the oldest out of my cousins, and I'm Mexican, and so we have a very large family. I have about 70 plus first cousins, and so to be the first is really that's really what I am. I was navigating these kind of uncharted waters on my own, and just really trying to seek guidance and help from programs and services. So a goal of mine was always to come back to Mount SAC some way, and then miracles happen, things happen where Mount SAC was funded in 2010 for the first time ever a Student Support Services TRIO grant. And I not lucky because I did work hard, but I did have my master's degree. I applied. And then when I got hired at Mount SAC, in 2011, he basically handed me the grant and said, "Here, we'll build it, create it," because there wasn't on our campus. So I've been fortunate enough to kind of be full circle at my institution that I once was a student in. So I'm very grateful for that.
Thinking about this a little earlier, and I like that you have the book in action, because I feel like those are the two pieces that really kind of capture both my journey, but also my passions today. So I cheated a little bit. My dad, who was a first-gen college student at Cal State LA, and got master's degrees in education afterwards and became a school teacher. So in a sense, being a professor, I feel like I'm carrying on his legacy. And so, and early on, I have these memories of, especially on hot days like today, going to the local public library and lying on the cold floor because we didn't have air conditioning at home, and reading books. And that's how I spent many hot summer days and many cold nights. To be honest, I just loved to read as a kid and just kept reading, and that propelled me into going to college. I did go to college back east at an Ivy League school. I like to kind of leave it at that. And there weren't a lot of Latinos, particularly Chicanos, that were there. I was one of a handful of individuals there. And so while I had a father who had been through the ringer before as a Cal State student. Many of my experiences were really, in a sense, first time experiences as well. As I started to look and thinking about what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. So I looked for grad school, came back to California, UC Berkeley, and got my doctorate there. I actually had intended to be a clinical psychologist as a practitioner, but I came to Cal State San Bernardino 32 years ago for a 1-year position because I needed to do something so I could finish my doctorate. And I loved it. And one of again, I can tell a really long story, so you can edit if you need to. But one of the stories is the guy who hired me, the chair, said, we don't, because I talked about my passion for giving back to my community, for trying to be, a mentor for other Latino students. And he said, we really don't have a lot of Latino students here in psychology. And I started walking the halls of the psychology area and thought, what the heck was he talking about? I edited that myself. He was wrong. There are plenty of Latino students. I found that I had a new passion, and that was to mentor others who were also interested in education. That was 32 years ago, like others who are, in my head, kids who know that they've been there a long time. It's hard to believe that I'm not the 20-year-old kid that I was when I got there. So, but I'm not, apparently. So that's been my passion. I've only recently, in the last 10 years, gotten involved in doing the community work that I'm doing. For many years, I was guilty of being kind of ivory tower kind of professor, working in labs on campus, mentoring good students who came from the community, but not really giving to the community that I was part of. So I've been really happy with the last 10 years where I'm starting to work with really the next generation, not the generation beyond the college students, the generation who will someday be college students, I think. that's been really exciting.
You all in some way work with underrepresented, underserved communities. So my question to all of you is, how exactly do you deal with the amount of obstacles and lack of resources usually found in underrepresented, underserved communities?
Yes. Well, I come from an institution with 30,000 plus students. And in general, students are sometimes lost and unseen. It's very, very easy to kind of become invisible. And for the particular population we work with, those students sometimes don't realize their potential and lack the skills when they first come to us to navigate those waters, to make themselves be seen and to advocate for them. So I think one of the challenges I see often is really trying to add those skills to their little toolbox right when they get there of self-advocacy. And just what I tell my students, I'm like, you just got to show up. You don't know the network that you're going to connect with because you don't know what you don't know yet. And you don't know the questions you need to be asking. So Ivan might recall, I would tell him often, you need to come to me so I can tell you the questions you need to go ask that you don't know you should be asking. But overall, because we have such a large institution, I really try to focus on that building of community with our students and making them feel like they're an individual and not a transactional, appointment. We really thrive on the idea that we want to make sure our students are seen, they're heard, and what better way than having these conversations one-on-one with our students. So Ivan knows I had an open door policy. If I was not busy, which students assumed I wasn't if there wasn't someone else in my office, they would come in and be, are you busy? No? Okay, let me sit down. But I love those moments because that's where you build that confidence in students to just have a conversation with someone they might fear on paper, and opening the conversation. But if you can speak to me like this, you can approach a professor and ask for a letter of rec. You can approach a fellow peer and ask for a collaboration or mentorship. So it's really, for me, it's building that confidence in our students to ask questions that otherwise they might feel, you know what, I've been turned away so many times, nobody listens to me, I'm not heard, why do I belong here, who cares? They have a lot of self-doubt. So it's really building that emotional platform with our students, because then once they have that confidence, then everything else we talk about, then they feel like they can do it. So it's really becoming that cheerleader and motivating them to know that they belong here. They made it this far and they're going to go even further. And they're going to encounter challenges and obstacles, but that's only going to make them stronger and better. And they then can give back to those that are watching them, pioneering for the first time this very, troublesome, bumpy road called academia, but it's going to be worth it.
That was awesome. So a quick question for you, Angelica, before we move on with the others. Earlier, you brought up that term imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And I know you kind of touched upon it right now and talking about how, oh, what's the point? I don't really belong here.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I wanted to ask you if you could kind of elaborate on that and tell us a little bit more about what exactly is the imposter thing or idea.
Sure. And I need to step away from that term syndrome because it's not an illness. So it's more of a feeling, an imposter feeling. And what that is in our students and even myself is you see that in a lot of first generation students that are navigating, these new waters. And they fear that they're not good enough. They fear that their peers are better than them because maybe they had different resources or opportunities. And they feel like, how am I good enough? And especially for our students, they come through our program thinking, I'm just going to graduate. But as Ivan might tell you, I always planted the seed of graduate school at minimum awareness. I was always emphasizing the idea of not, just knowing your options, not cutting yourself off. And with a lot of students, they felt, I barely can get through college. I don't belong in higher education. How am I going to succeed? They're going to judge me. So it's having all this ideas and negative thoughts just clustering, and that sometimes prohibits our students from moving forward, from talking to a professor in their office hours, from speaking up in class, feeling the fear of being judged. And like I said, as a first gen myself, professional almost for 20 years, there's moments that I think I still have to process those feelings and emotions, and it's something that might be with me for the rest of my life. And I think it's okay to acknowledge. It's just then you have to hush that voice and say, quiet, I'm amazing. You have to become your own cheerleader. So you have to really look at your own resume and say, you know what, I have done enough. I am enough. I am good enough. I belong. So that's why I really focus on that emotional, strong foundation with our students, because I think that mindset really helps them then progress academically.
Thank you, Angelica. So just to reiterate, so people at home still have it fresh in their minds, how do you deal with the obstacles present in serving underserved, underrepresented communities, the obstacles present?
Response, but also from the community college perspective. We at Mount SAC are one of the largest community colleges out of the 114 community colleges. We have about 55,000 plus students. That's credit, non-credit, at our institution. So for our students, it's very easy for them to kind of follow the cracks, if you will, right? In terms of making connections on our campus. And as Angelica just stated, it's hard to identify how do you know what you don't know, right? And I think I'm in a very unique place as the counselor of the program and also as a coordinator, because I do have duals as my title, and I'm also a faculty member on campus. And so I have the very unique role of having an opportunity to sit with students in counseling appointments. And a lot of times they come into our counseling appointments at the community college, with questions about how do I graduate from Mount SAC, how do I get my degree, and maybe go back to work out there, right? And so the minute we start talking about transferring, about, instilling these other what ifs, right? And thinking the big picture, I always like to say that I'm brainwashing my students to continue on with their education beyond it, because we are, for a lot of our students, we are the entry point, right? At the community college, they come and they say, Diana, I only want a 2-year degree. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay, we about that. But then once they start seeing that they're able to achieve, and a lot of them do it very successfully academically, they start seeing that they are working towards their degree, then we can start talking about what the bachelor is going to look like and what is that system going to look like, right, when you get there. Because for a community college student, prior to transferring, students finally get to a point where they finally understand, oh, okay, I understand how to be a student now, right? So I tell them, all you have to do is copy and paste this same techniques when you get to the 4-year university. All the tips and the tools and everything that you have in your toolbox now, just use it over there, right? And one of the first things I advise my students to do is find a person, find a mentor, find somebody that looks like you, that is looking out for you, be it through a program or be it through the classroom setting at the 4-year university. It's going to be very important. Because as a transfer student, they get there to the 4-year university, and even though on paper they're a junior standing, meaning they're halfway done, mentally and emotionally and physically, they feel they're freshmen all over again, right? They feel like, okay, now, I knew Mount SAC and I was cool with Mount SAC. I knew where my breaks, like where to take my break, where to do this, but now at the 4-year, I'm back to square one. So I think it's really empowering the students to just think long term. And I know my students in our counseling appointments get sometimes overwhelmed and they have to say, Dad, calm down, like relax. Like that's cute that you think that, or that you're talking about a master's degree or even a doctorate degree, because we start telling them about McNair and all that, right? Kind of the TRIO pipeline. And once I start explaining to them the possibilities through TRIO specifically, right? Because the program that I represent, I can see their eyes kind of like, really? Like I could do more? And it's for me as an educator, I mean, I've been I've been an educator now from going on 18 years, right? Prior to Mount SAC, I was at Cal State Long Beach, and prior to that, I was with Pasadena City College through Alwood, right? But that was I was working with Upward Bound, which is a pre-college program at the time. But it's just really exciting to start seeing that they're part of a network, right? Students are this network now of support, and support that they're going to be able to tap into even beyond when they leave my office or when they leave our institution, right? Because once they leave us, be it obviously they transfer to a four-year university, the beauty of our program, even though we are still at the community college, is that we always will always have their back, even though they are at the four-year university. So really, I think the biggest struggle is helping students understand and realize their potential and their ability, because a lot of times, and I struggle with this as myself as being a first-generation college student myself, is where do you turn for validation and that support to guide you and to assure that you're on the right track. And I think a lot of times, I know I need that sometimes professionally. So I know my students at Mount SAC, they range from 18-year-olds, and my oldest student is a 68-year-old, right, who is about to transfer this fall, 2020, and then graduate and from Mount SAC. So we have students in different stages of their own personal lives coming to us seeking guidance, which is a very exciting thing. But yeah, the struggle, I think the biggest struggle for the population that I work with, first generation college students, is just equipping them with the knowledge and the tools to succeed at the 2-year and at the 4-year.
The smaller Cal States, there are smaller, but I'd say we're about kind of middle of the road. But psychology is a really popular major. And so there are a lot of students in psychology. And my fear and my appreciation for my two colleagues here is that they're identifying people early, and they are giving them the tools to hopefully stand out a little bit. So I sometimes worry that I don't have enough opportunity with enough undergrads to be able to kind of just be kind of a motivating factor for more people. I have the good fortune of, I guess I have an open door policy when we actually have a physical office that we can be in. And so students come by, people who actually aren't Cal State San Bernardino students come by or reach out to me like Ivan did. And so but it does take them having someone in their life who I think kind of motivated them, like go talk to this college professor, like, and he doesn't really have 3 heads, and he doesn't, he wasn't, born, truly with a silver spoon in his mouth. The fact that he had I'm a college graduate as a dad, was notwithstanding. He is the children of the people you are going to be, basically. And so I've worked really hard, I think, to try and be as accessible as possible to the people I encounter. And I think that's an important resource. And the other thing that I think I try and do, I decided really early on, and this kind of fits with who I am, I don't say no a lot to a lot of people or a lot of things. So if people have ideas, or if they have the idea that they somehow might get a doctorate, it's not my job to say, no, that's not going to happen. I want to help support them to do those things. And I may, kind of also try and instill the, what about, people who want to get their 4-year degree and then they're done. But what about grad school? What about a doctoral program? So I think the challenge is just having enough access. I'm also aware, one of the things that we're encountering right now is the current administration's decision to be sending international students back home. And I'm really floored by my colleagues who probably have many diverse kind of backgrounds that they come from, including some people who probably had more opportunities than even I had. And people are volunteering to go back into the classroom, because if that's the way that they can make sure that their students are not being sent home because of the nature of education being online right now, that they're willing to sacrifice potentially their own health to do so. And I think, so I see those sorts of things. I'm struggling right now with a one of my graduates of our graduate program who is a DACA student, who has managed with the support of policies to be able to get her college degree, to be able to get her graduate degree. And now she's going to have a challenge of getting employed as the wonderful therapist that she can be because of the nature of the policies that we have with regard to employment. So there are lots of factors that are negatively impacting underrepresented populations, and I'm a drop in the bucket, and hopefully there are others who are also willing to take things on at multiple levels to address these issues.
COVID-19. It's been a recent thing that's affected a lot of different sectors in our lives. And as far as higher education goes, I haven't heard too much other than things having to go virtual and the whole DACA situation, where students are being forced to leave because they don't have a physical location to go to here in the United States. How has this affected the populations you work with? Has it affected anyone personally, and or just in general? What are your thoughts?
It was definitely a transition for a lot of our students. Our students had to adjust in a week, like I'm sure on most campuses, to move over online. So with that came a lot of little fires that we spent the first few weeks working out with our students, getting internet, getting a computer, getting the professors to give them a stable answer as to how they were going to do curriculum. So there's uh, a lot of changes that our students really needed to process during this pandemic, including some personal issues. Unfortunately, some of our students' families, friends, colleagues, they were affected. So like I said, the importance of that emotional stability, it was very, very visual this semester for us. We spent a lot of times trying to engage our students, which, as you all know, being online all day is not the same as having that one-on-one conversation with our students, not to mention our students' living situations. I spoke to students that sometimes had to have a session in the closet because that was the only place they had privacy. Had a student who had to leave the dorms, and her family was in a remote area that had no Wi-Fi, so she was living in a space with 10 other people, sharing a room with 5 other kids, also doing Zoom. So it was coaxing them through a lot of the emotional distress of not only navigating their academics, which some of them felt like the professors gave them more work because, they didn't know how to virtually do some of the lectures. And so they compensated by giving them other work where the students, they had spotty Wi-Fi, they had other family obligations. So there was a lot of different situations with our students, nothing the same across the board. But what we really tried to focus this semester with our students was we would host cultivating community Fridays, and just giving the students an opportunity to hop on and no agenda, no work, and just have fun, play games, tell jokes, just have a place to just kind of talk about your week, talk about stressors. And it was actually very beneficial for us because our students were talking to each other on a platform where, if they chose to turn off their camera, they could, and just talk and just let out some steam and process everything that they were feeling and going through. In regards to DACA, our TRIO programs cannot serve officially any DACA students. However, we as helpers, I know personally, I know a few students that are DACA that I just worked with to mentor on the side. And I know that they were going through a lot of turmoil themselves because some were openly about their legal status, some were not. So, there was a lot of fear of the unknown and a lot of questions related to why stay in school? Why not just leave? What is there for me? So it was a little coaxing those students through the idea, like, a lot of things can change, policies can change, but your education will always be with you, no matter what. They can never take your degree away from you. So although it's uncertain, we can't predict the future opportunities, career, but your education will always be there. So it was, for me, I had to work with our students to keep that motivation of why the academics are so important and why that was going to be a very important resource in the future to help them.
What has COVID done? How has it impacted us, our students, our communities? It has definitely, I think, for me, being the coordinator of the program, we had to really shift our approach, right? How do we deliver our services of what we do that we would deliver physically in a in a physical space in our space. Because one of the things that I think our program has been very successful at Mount SAC is that we have developed a sense of community, a sense of belonging, right? Students walk into our space and they feel like this is home, this is where I belong, this is where everybody knows my name kind of vibe that we have in our physical space. So how do we transfer that piece to this virtual online, through Zoom mode, right? So I think professionally, I would say just to really kind of reimagine of how do we still provide and support our students, right? So I think the very beginning when pandemic hit, it was very, at least for us, it was just trying to figure out how do we deliver the services, to our students in this online remote way, right? The reality of our students as well, because we work with first generation low income students, many of them are the frontline workers, essential workers that are out working at the grocery store, they're working at the restaurants, they're working for Grubhub. I mean, they are, risking their lives, if you will, right, out there in the community. And so that is something that's the reality of a population that we work with. And, like my colleague Angelica mentioned, is a lot of our students too, their family situation now has shifted. For the majority of our students, a lot of our students did not opted out in online classes just pre-pandemic. That's just not the way that they would take classes at Mount SAC. If anything, my students avoided taking online classes unless they had to, just because they preferred, a lot of my students, there are some students that prefer the online mode pre-pandemic, but majority of our students, online, education was not something that they, and obviously just like everybody, right, we were all thrusted into this new mode. So a lot of it was just teaching them how to navigate, this new online way that I'm still trying, at the beginning I was trying to figure it out and navigate it myself. But it was constantly just having to reshift how we do our delivery of services. I think that was the biggest, transition for us. And also the interesting thing was like, let's assess their needs, right? The technological needs specifically. That was one of the first things. We want to make sure that our students have Wi-Fi and laptop and all that. And, it was easy for us to say, let's create a survey and assess their needs. Well, how are they going to access that survey if they don't have Wi-Fi, if they don't have a laptop? So it was kind of, you really have to kind of take that back, and a lot of the things that we assumed before, like send them a quick email or call them on the phone, a lot of those things are not that accessible anymore, right, for our students. So we really had to take a step back and really redesign, how we are reaching out to our students. And one of the things that we did is we created through Canvas. Canvas is the course learning system at Mount SAC that we use, and we created almost like a hub in Canvas, through Canvas. And it's just a way for students, like Angelica mentioned, to check in, to just see our faces, right? And have that familiar sense of belonging that they were so connected with the program with. So for us, I think it's just been really shifting what we do. And I know, like institutionally, our campus has really done a good job, I think, especially in the spring where things were just kind of thrusted upon all of us, right, to shift to this online mode. The campus has also responded with, being creating academic policies that also, meet the students' needs, right, in terms of, now being able to get an excused withdrawal, right, and not acting in their GPA, and getting the option of a no pass versus a grade option, and things like that is beneficial for our students. And I think a lot of it is just educating them on these new policies that are benefiting them. So it's been a struggle, especially because even personally, right? Now, especially that very first week of pandemic, which is like for us, it was like mid-March, end of March. we personally called every single student of ours on our caseload. We have about 200 students, and we personally called every single student. That's what we spent, when pandemic first hit, and we were now working remotely. And that I'm not going to lie, the first couple of days as I was checking in with my students, and they're crying and they're overwhelmed, and I just continue providing that validation and to let them know I'm also struggling too, right? As now as a professor, as the coordinator, I'm now having to shift the way I do things. So it was providing a lot of validation that you're not alone, and we will get through this together.
News coverage lately has covered the Black Lives Matter movement, and this isn't a new topic, it isn't a new subject. As history shows, minorities have suffered due to the systemic issues currently found in our current society. So my question to you is, as staff, faculty that have been in higher education for a while now and know the ins and outs, how would you recommend we advance the institution of higher education to provide more for those underserved, underrepresented students that may currently be suffering from the systemic issues? Or do you believe this is something beyond higher education?
A very important conversation. And if anything, we spend a lot of time processing with a lot of our students, and just going through how they were feeling emotionally, whether it felt like it was something personal to them that they identified with, or as a spectator or just a fellow supporter. But really what we've done with our students is given them, besides a platform to just talk about their emotions, is, again, arming them with their voice. As a student, you pay tuition. This is your institution, so you should demand certain things that you feel deficient. And so it's really arming the students with a voice for them to speak up and say what they feel and say what they need. So there's been a lot of student organizing, which I think is amazing, because that's what's needed. The administrative heads, they'll listen to us staff, but it's not as strong and as valid as coming from the students, because they're the ones that are lacking those services. We've recently just opened up an African American center to support our students, but the space is so small. They have so many limited resources going to that program. So I'm proud to say that the students have spoken up. They have written a letter to our president. They are voicing not just open concerns, but they are organized and saying, I want these changes made. So it's definitely the time to change certain ways and processes. We can't be a spectator. It's not enough to say, I support the movement. We need to be in action. So it's really important for us to arm our students with that strength to say, it's your voice and we support you. And it is definitely the time for you to speak up.
So along the same line is because we're federally funded, our TRIO grant at Mount SAC, we have we depend on the federal government, if you will, for these funds. And so one of the things that is instilled in our program is the importance of student advocacy. And every year we're fortunate enough to get funded by the campus to take a group of students to Washington, D.C. To lobby, if you will, to advocate on behalf of the importance of TRIO programs, right? So, and we were actually scheduled to go out to policy seminar this March 2020, but pandemic happened. So obviously that was not, we had to pull the plug on that trip. But yeah, along the same lines with Angelica, my colleague just mentioned, is, right now is a really not exciting, but it's a very interesting time. I would say exciting as well, because we are I think in a time right now where we are able to almost kind of reimagine our educational system, right? A lot of the things that we were talking about, specifically with Black Lives Matter, these are things that have been going on for years, right? And now this is an exciting time, even as an educator, to really have a hand in that, in maybe shifting policies that impact our students, all students, right? But specifically our Black students on our campus, And so the same thing is empowering our students to understand their voice and the importance of voting, right? We are kind of, really emphasizing and highlighting you need to get out there and vote, right? Even if it's early voting, but really, to partake in that process. And also the importance of filling out the census, right? To get counted, to get resources. So that's been the students, and I think it's been interesting because obviously we're all doing this from the stay-at-home orders, right? We're all doing this in the midst of the stay-at-home order. So we're all doing this. We're all, organizing. Students are organizing. I know educators at Mount SAC, we're also organizing, right? Of how do we kind of move things forward that students are demanding, right? Just very similar to Angelica's comment about students are organizing themselves and coming up with a list of these are the things that are wrong or that you can help fix at Mount SAC. Here you go, Diana. And so now it is my job, right? My role, I think, that I'm taking upon myself to kind of moving that up the chain of command, right? I do sit on academic senate at Mount SAC, so I kind of have that role on my campus. And then about 2 years ago in 2018, we felt as professionals, right? As professionals, we felt that there wasn't any type of mentorship amongst professionals, right? Especially, obviously, in the work that we do, we're all about motivating and empowering our students, right? That's what, a lot of us on our campus do. But professionally, as a first generation college student or first generation professional, there wasn't anything on our campus that, unified us as a professional for the professional voice. And so in 2018, a group of us just kind of started having this conversation and thought, well, what if, right? When you start kind of planning, and then next thing you know, we came up with an association, and it's called the Latinx Professional Association of Mount SAC. So now we're about 70, professionals strong, right? Since the inception of us, but what we're doing within that association is we're also trying to move things along that our students are bringing to us of concerns and demands. It is an exciting time. That's what I meant by exciting, in that change should be happening or is going to happen, and this is the time to make it happen. And I think unifying on different fronts, unifying the students, unifying the professional voice, I think that's where we can start seeing change institutionally.
I think, and I'm kind of resonating with this idea that it truly is mixed emotions. Again, being a young child during the 60s, various protests that were taking place, seeing being a young, relatively young professional in LA during the Rodney King kind of incident and the uprising after that. And then seeing that again, this continues and has continued again for generations of black individuals and people of color in general being kind of both terrorized by police as well as at times killed by the police. And that part is really disappointing, saddening, maddening, all those things. But I do think it's an exciting time. It feels different. I've heard that a lot, and I've heard people say, I hate to say that because it sounds so cliche, and yet it really does. For all those other incidents you typically had for an issue that was about Black lives, you had Black individuals, and at times you had people from other groups of color. I remember in my days as a student and kind of marching with each other, recognizing that there was power in us banding together as a group of color, as opposed to the Black students or the brown students or whoever else it might have been. But I really see kind of many people in society stepping forward and saying, Black Lives Matter, and these issues need to stop now, and recognizing their privilege and choosing to use that privilege to amplify other people's voices. So I think that I see myself and my colleagues as having a responsibility to figure out how this fits within the context of what we're teaching and use this opportunity to help people kind of engage in critical reflection about these things and to take it beyond the critical reflection into the action stage. I think for both this and for COVID-19, I learned pretty quickly that having time in my class meetings to just kind of check in with people about these kind of twin issues that were kind of coming on the tail of each other was really critical. That I wanted to get to the material, I need to get to the material, but we couldn't get to the material if we were kind of not, if I wasn't checking in with my students. And it was my grad students who led the way for me with that, recognizing they just value the time to meet as a group, to talk about what was going on, to talk about the impact of this latest atrocity, basically, and recognize that they needed to do something. So that's been nice. It's been nice to see my colleagues again stepping up. And again, one of the things that I'm just going to go ahead and say is that sometimes you can see like the college response, and again, we might recognize that college professors are part of this, but we see this administration response that sometimes is well thought out, but isn't always as genuine as we'd like it to be. And so I know that at least in some instances, as a message was put out to the Cal State San Bernardino community, that people, it was slow in the beginning, but it's become a pretty loud voice of people saying, we need to address these issues in our own university, because there are issues that are related to this, and that it's not okay. And I like, and I agree that students have a loud voice in universities. They do at Cal State San Bernardino. Students sometimes want me to do things, and I say, they don't really care what I, as a faculty member, think. They care what you think, and it's good for them to learn that. I'm going to kind of, I do think that we need to address some of the disparities that exist, and we're all about addressing those educational disparities, but the internet divide is a critical issue in this time, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to make sure that internet is accessible to everyone, because we can't do what we're trying to do. We can't do our mission unless they let us back into the classroom, without everybody having the internet capability to take part in these conversations like this, to just watch this sort of recording, but also to engage in class in the ways that they're going to need to engage in class in order to be successful. And so I think there's a lot of issues, policy issues, that have to be changed, that go beyond the university, and that we're going to have to all get involved in that as well. I like the idea we need to vote. We need to vote with our with our conscience, basically, and change what exists right now.
This question is on behalf of possible future students who are interested in attending an institution of higher education. My question to you is, what would you advise they do to mentally prepare themselves for the rigors of higher education? And I believe this question is important now more than ever, because things are changing so quickly and rapidly. How it was, from speaking from personal experience, it was hard enough to wrap my head around the idea of higher education. How would you even go about that now with the way things are during this pandemic and in the future?
It's a great question, because obviously if it was in person, those steps would be very different. But seeing that we are in the virtual world, there is different new challenges that come with that mindset. And personally for my students that are current students, they have a hard time just transitioning from the fact that the spring semester ended and there's actual summer, and they don't have those original markers that will tell you this one stopped, this started. So right now I think it's making sure that the students are preparing for all that could go wrong, so that when all the good things happen, they're ready for it, and teaching them flexibility. And that goes for students and for us professionals as well. You cannot plan everything in stone, you have to learn to go with all these changes, because we all know that they could say one thing today and administration changes this. There's so many things that are fluctuating. So if students are fixated on the idea that this is going to be the plan, they're going to set themselves up for maybe some disappointment and some hardship. So for our incoming students, it's like my colleague said, it's enforcing that how to build community virtually and adapting to that new challenge. So for students, they need to open themselves up. And this is where that seeking resources and advocacy is very important, because we can't force students to log on, or we don't know their personal situations or challenges. So we have to be flexible with that as well, but capture them when we can, making ourselves be as open and as available as possible, making sure that they know they have a virtual home to come to, I think is very important. And really just, pumping them with that positive vibe, overwhelming them with that voice and information, putting those breadcrumbs of, hey, just in case, I'm here, we're virtual, we do that, so constantly putting that message out to them. So, and hoping that, when they need it, they will know what to do and where to reach, and say, okay, and at least I know this one program is there. They're always flooding my email, my invoice. Eventually they're like, okay, fine, I'll bite. So it's just really being that positive role model of, you know what, we're going to get through this together. This is a new chapter. We're all pioneering together. I tell my students, we're making history. It may not be the best history. It may be very challenging. It may be frustrating, but at the end of the day, we're making history. And, TRIO was born from all the deficiencies there was in the world at that moment, and it's kind of unfortunate, but it's happening again. There's still those deficiencies. So I tell students, this is the time. It's amazing for you to plug in your voice, and you will be forever in that history of change.
So great points, Angelica, and I think I want to echo a lot of that. And the advice I give students, especially during these virtual remote times, is as you're exploring, either it's what college am I going to go to, or what grad school am I going to go to, or what doctorate program am I going to get into, it's really finding a mentor. And I can't emphasize that enough, of finding someone, and all that really means. A mentor is somebody who has already done what you want to do, right? Has already taken that pathway, and all they're doing is showing you the way, saying this is how you can do it. These are the shortcuts, or these are the tips of how to navigate the next steps you're going to go into. So that would probably be my first advice to students or individuals watching this, is find a mentor. And if you're lucky, a mentor will find you, but it doesn't always work out that way. So if it doesn't, then that just means that you, as a student, in doing your research, have to just dig a little deeper. And so that means any faculty member, professor that you're taking, somebody that helped you, fill out a form, or anything, that somebody that you admire and respect. And again, it's somebody that can show you the way of how to go on to the steps. So that would probably be my first advice. And the second thing would be to get involved in programs and services, and at the institution that you're going to be potentially attending. And also during these remote times and virtual times is, not giving up and being persistent, in the sense of, if you email them and they don't respond to you, then give them an email nudge. If they don't again, then another email nudge. I think this is the time, because that's one thing that I've found with our students, especially those that are at the 2-year right now and are about to transfer us and leave us this fall. The big question is, should I still move to Sacramento if everything's going to be online, right? And so COVID obviously has impacted a lot of the decision-making processes for our students, right? For their families, for their communities. And so, my advice would be, to get connected. And one of the things that I've also found is, during these remote times, the students are not getting, like, the institutions are not responding quick enough, or they're not emailing you back enough, right? So it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating for students, because they've tried and they've called and they've emailed and no responses. So if one opportunity closes and you try to find another opportunity. But it is a time to be patient, but also be work hard in trying to contact somebody, especially during these remote times. Because I've encountered some of my students that you have to deal with financial aid questions and things at the 4-year already, even though they are a 2-year student right now. There's really a lack of response, right? And this is impacting their big decision of what do I do next. And so mentorship and programs and services, I think, is the best way to understand the next steps that are going to be lying ahead of you.
I guess I'm going to start off like early on, pick up a book and read. I know it's old fashioned. You may have to kind of show some people what a book looks like, but I'm still kind of a big fan of those. And so I think the more that you can just generally kind of inform yourself about things you really love, you're going to propel that kind of passion for pursuing education. I just kind of dovetailing, and I had this thought early on, and I certainly don't want this to sound defensive, but life changed drastically for students and but for all of us, and I think many of us, and myself included, in our attempts to figure out how to make things comparable to what we typically would do in the classroom, we ended up creating more work for students. Well, guess what? We created more work for ourselves too, because every single thing that is new that I know I have to read that. So instead of reading a book, I'm reading students' responses to the various questions I'm asking them to respond to try and approximate the kind of discussion we would have in the classroom. And so I know that I had to figure out by week 3, we were, when the pandemic hit, we were still in the quarter system. So we had just completed the winter quarter and we're beginning the spring quarter. So I had to quickly kind of pivot and do something I've never done before, teach online in this fashion and do kind of online discussions and all that sort of stuff. And I had to change for my own survival, I had to change what I was assigning to students. And so I think a lot of faculty did that sort of thing. But one of the things, and I'm sometimes a little envious, sometimes a little annoyed when I hear people out in the world whose lives, unfortunately, many people don't have a paycheck these days. But many of us were fortunate to continue to keep our job. And I hear from people who say, I heard someone say the other day, I love the pandemic. It's like, I don't really have to go to work. I don't have to work as hard at home. I can log on and pretend like I'm working and I can go. And I'm just thinking, I'm working 18 hours a day all the time, like nonstop. And so I'm not loving the pandemic. And this is my rant, by the way. So this is back to kind of encouraging what I heard people say, which is that be persistent with be respectful, but be persistent with your kind of resending something. Recognize that I may have seen it in a quick moment when I was doing something else. So yeah, that student asked me a question. But when I'm looking for an email to respond to, I may have had literally 300, 400. Ivan has been in the group when I've put my email up on the thing just to get to something. They're always chastising me. Why do I have so much email? I keep wondering why they keep sending me email. That's the issue. So ask the question again, be persistent. And then remember that we also are human, just like I need to make sure that I'm cutting breaks for my students and everyone else. Please cut us some breaks too and recognize like we're overwhelmed with what we're doing right now. And then finally, I really just encourage people to, I like the idea of finding a mentor. It's always been an important thing for me in terms of being a mentor, but also encouraging my students to find your mentor. Find the person who feels right for you, and ask them questions. Ask them questions about how they do things. And also ask them not just about how they do the things they do that got them to the position they're in and that you want to be in, but ask them about the rest of the stuff, because all that stuff matters. And for me, it's about forming those relationships with the students that I mentor. And the more that they understand that I'm not just a professor, but I'm a father and grandfather and, et cetera, and all the struggles that I have in life and all the joy I have in life, that's all important too. And that I think there's a motivational factor in people. Like, I can grow up and be that person, you know, and so I think that's important.
You've all touched upon the idea of a mentor. Now, to us, a mentor is a very big thing. They're this like magical person, this almost superhero-like person that always has the right words to say for any given situation. So my question is, how exactly do we go about doing that? Is there a specific route to gaining a mentor? And if there isn't, which some of you have alluded to, what has your experience been with getting a mentor?
That is a great question. I think as a student who's navigating something new, yeah, you may not just be ready to walk up to someone and say, hey, you look like a great match. But it's honestly, it's going to the resources or the places that you feel comfortable with and then talking to those people. It could be a receptionist at the front desk. It could be someone you encounter in bursar's office. As a transfer student, definitely going to your department and talking to professors there. I always tell my students, I'm the hub and the nucleus of a lot of places is whoever sits at that front desk. They are the point of contact for that department, and usually they are a fountain of knowledge, and they're a network, and their information is sometimes gold. So I encourage students just to talk to people. Obviously, it's going to be a little different shifting online, but because we're online, not a lot of different departments, programs, colleges, they have virtual lobbies, and it's hopping on there and really engaging just in general questions. And as a student, I know that if I ask a question and that response is open and I feel like that person is listening to me and actually giving me that time, then it's a breadcrumb. I may not consider that person a mentor, but it can start as a network, and with that engagement, eventually develop that mentorship relationship. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Ivan, because Ivan has gone through the pipeline, and he did come from the community college working with Diana. And when I first met Ivan came to my orientation for transfers. And at that moment, we had a little bit of a conflict with belonging to several different programs, which at the time they couldn't overlap. And he was already in this other program. So on paper, technically, he didn't qualify for us, but adamant Ivan said, I belong here. I need to be in this program. And that was our first conversation. I'm like, I think I like you. And that flourished into a lot more conversations. And although I never formally considered myself a mentor to Ivan, Ivan did say those words later on. So, but it started with him just using the skills he learned and acquired from another resourceful program, and said, no, this is what I've been told I need, and I'm gonna get it. And that self-advocacy really got him in the door with our program and opened up the door to a lot of conversations, which is important. So
I'm very happy to hear that, Angelica, that the advice and everything we imparted onto Ivan, he was able to apply it when he got to your institution. That makes me very happy. But yeah, the one thing about the mentorship relationship that to students watching this is that it's a two-way street, right? It's a relationship. So as a mentor, I've been, again, in the higher education game for 15 plus years. So I have a lot of mentees, right? And one of the things is that there's certain expectations of the role of the mentor, and there's certain expectations of the role of the mentee. So I think the role of the mentee being the one that will, reach out to it, and and my colleagues have already we've already discussed how to do that. But once you have that mentorship relationship, you identify something that you respect, admire, and you go into the relationship, the mentorship relationship with that individual, there are expectations for the mentee. And the expectations could be, again, reaching out to the mentor, emailing them. And if they don't respond back to you, because they are probably really busy, you nudge them again with that email or that phone call reminder to get on their radar. But really, it's identifying somebody who can show you the way, like I stated earlier. For me personally, I stated this at the beginning, I am the oldest out of my family, and in just trying to navigate the system of higher education, I don't think I thought out when I got to Mount SAC, like, I need to find a mentor. Like, I wasn't that, on top of it. It kind of naturally happened, right? I was part of the bridge program, and the mentor was just like on me. She would call me. She would hold me accountable when nobody else was, right? The thing about education is that it's a very lonely process because of FERPA, right? Like, it's not like they're calling home and saying, hey, Diana didn't come to class today, Diana's failing, right? That doesn't happen in higher education. Therefore, I didn't know this at the time, but this individual who just it organically happened because she was my counselor and I was in her program, and I just kind of kept going to her, and she just continued responding to me. And so it organically happened. And then after I transferred to UC Santa Barbara from Mount SAC, I still would call her because I'm like, she knows me, she understands my struggle. Like, I still needed her to coach me through that chapter of my life. And you can do that, students. You can keep the same mentor throughout your whole journey of life if you wanted to, right? Thankfully, that individual is now my colleague, right? Now we sit at 6 a.m. meetings together. She's a faculty member. So it's been interesting but I quickly understood my role as a mentee. Like, I have a responsibility to reach out to my mentor, to call my mentor, to guide when I need that advice and that guidance in my life. So understand that it is a two-way street in the sense it's a relationship. So, but the first thing I would advise you is this is what I did, is I looked at on campus of, this is a cool person, good vibe, but she has the job that I would want one day, right? And I think you alluded to that earlier. The more I kind of was drawn to what she was doing, which is the counselor working with students, I started asking her of like, what did you do? And where did you go to school? And I kind of was almost trying to do the same thing she did, right? Because I'm like, if it worked out for her, then it's going to work out for me. And then along the way, I realized I constantly, to this day, I still go to her. Now she's my mentor in the professional aspect. She's guiding me of like, that meeting was crazy, huh? Like, and she's more of just kind of, because she's obviously has more years in the game of higher education, she's breaking things down for me that I wouldn't necessarily know. And that's the beauty of a mentorship, is that there is really no end point, right? There really is no time, like, all right, mentee, good job, you made it alive, bye, right? There's always going to be, even to this day, I have some of my students who started off with me at Mount SAC, a two-year college, and now they're in their doctorate program. I don't even have my doctorate, right? So now it's kind of, the mentee is now the mentor. But, it's really just interesting, because that relationship can continue flourishing as long as the mentee keeps seeking that advisement and that guidance in every chapter of their life. So students or anybody watching this video, the first thing I would do is look at an individual who has the job or it is in the setting that you kind of maybe could see yourself doing one day, or that you are going to navigate one day.
So I like a lot of what I've heard, and I really appreciate being part of this, because you're reminding me of all the things that I need to make sure that I'm doing on my side. But I like the idea, and I've often told my students, the person who is there at the front desk, they actually run the show. They're my boss. They tell me what to do and where to be. So, yeah, definitely pick the brains of the office staff, because they know the ins and outs. And I think there are a lot of people who do mentor us. So I think many of us have multiple mentors. I'm always thinking, of course, kind of egocentrically about faculty mentors. And I think that, again, knock on doors in these days, look at, we have a decent website for looking at the faculty and seeing what their areas are. And, talk to them about their research and say, you're interested in, do a little homework ahead of time and know a little bit about what they do and why it's important to them. but also in classes, I'd say go and think, I really like this person. I like the way they teach. I could imagine having a conversation with this person and have those conversations with people and find somebody. I like to work with large numbers of students at one time. It has its challenges, and I always wish I had more alone time with a student to really mentor that student. And I got to keep that in mind and figure out how to make sure that that happens. But I like the fact that my students can mentor each other, and I would encourage people who are not quite yet with a faculty mentor to find other students who are a little bit ahead of them in the process and say, what did you do? And how did you get involved in that TRIO program? And what about that McNair program? And what's your experience been? And they've got it figured out most often. And again, it's why oftentimes people do knock on my door and say, I was told to come talk to you. So, I often say, when I find that person who tells people to come talk to me, I have a few words for them. But mostly I'm grateful because I get great students out of it. I got to spend time yesterday with a colleague. Her name's Dr. Snyder these days, and she's out at our Palm Desert satellite campus as an instructor. But out of the blue, I don't think we had spoken in a few years. And she just said, I need to talk to you. I need mentorship. I shouldn't use that word, but about how to do the online teaching. And she's going to do it for the first time this coming fall. She's a therapist. She was my undergrad. She became a master's student. Then I got to be her dissertation chair at a different institution. That was 20 years ago that she was my student. And so, yeah, it doesn't end. And a little bit before that, someone who knew I was having a milestone birthday that I really didn't have, Ivan. That was totally a lie. Um, I was ongoing that I don't really have birthdays, that my students aren't allowed to know that they happen. But my old students do know that they happen. And so she wrote, and she was probably my student in the early 90s, before any of you were born. And so, I think she was, it was quite touching. She ended up writing this whole kind of birthday tribute and so it's nice. And we had this wonderful conversation, my wife and I and her, for hours on Zoom one night, just kind of touching base. And she's got kids of her own these days, and it's wonderful to have those ongoing relationships. To me, that's what a mentorship's about. And ultimately, I heard someone say something that reminded me, a big part of the way I do research is about co-learning, that I have things to teach, but I have things to learn from my students. I have things to learn from the community members that we collaborate with. And that's true in a mentorship relationship as well. I'm learning a lot from my mentees all the time, mostly about, technology and stuff, things I have no idea about. So all those sorts of things matter to me. And I think it's critical you find somebody and recognize that, and if the first person doesn't work out, find another one. There's a lot of us.
So my question to you now is, what do you foresee being the future, for those populations that you've worked with after you retire? What's on the horizon?
What's on the horizon? Well, success and happiness, whatever that means to them, and that could be in so many different ways, and shapes and forms. I'm happy when I see my students succeed, and especially for me, seeing students come in to the university with a lot of questions, doubts, concerns, and not really seeing the big picture or seeing that finish line of graduation, and then being part of their graduation and seeing that excitement, that emotion of knowing they made it, although feeling we already knew. And I want to use Ivan as an example. We had many conversations in my office, like, oh my God, when am I going to finish? What am I going to do? But because of that conversation building, storytelling, there was an evolution and a growth. And for me personally, I love being able to witness that growth and development in students when they themselves don't see it necessarily until the end. And they're, oh my God, I'm done. I'm a professional. I am asking my network of mentors to come to a panel. So it's for me, it's beautiful just to see our students and in their niche and finding that thing that makes them happy and going through, a windy road of finding what that is. And again, being connected to these students out in the world, for me, that's fulfilling. So I feel like we've done what we can. We've invested that time and energy, the tools to build that toolkit of life. And we just have to let you go and hope for the best and hope that you use what you can to make yourself happy in this world, whatever it might be.
Well, I would say for me, I foresee for the future of the population that I work with, and the population of Ramayan is first generation college students, is that we are breaking the cycle of being first generation. So what I mean by that is I have a lot of students in my program since 2011 that are parents themselves, right? They have children. And this happens almost every year at the end of this, except for this year because of the pandemic. But at the end of the year, they'll bring their children, into our space and say, look, we have, this is where mommy, or daddy spend their time, right? And the children are all excited. And my students will say, I can't wait till your program, mijo, mija, to their child. And I say, no. They don't qualify for the program anymore because you, mom or dad, had to go get your bachelor's degree, right? So, but that's the beauty of what we do, right? The beauty of what we do specifically in Rio is that we are changing just generationally, impacting their futures, right? So I understand that I'm a first generation student in my family of 5 siblings, but I know now that my daughter is not going to be able to benefit from these TRIO programs. She's not going to be a first generation college student, but that's okay, right? Because she has a pretty, cool mom that's going to help her navigate. But, so that's, I think, the beauty of what we do in TRIO is that we are trying to empower our students. So that way, if they have, families of their own, or even if it's their communities, a lot of our students, like yourself, Jaragive, are first generation college students, imparting knowledge through this venue, right, through this space here, to other students, to other individual communities. So that's the beauty of the work that we do, that it doesn't just, end with, okay, I got my degree and that's it. It's a lot of our students go back into their communities and impart that knowledge and those tools to other members of their communities, be it their family structure or in their communities that they belong to. So to me, that's also very exciting, is, to tell my students, no, I'm sorry, your daughter or your son can't qualify for our program, but obviously we still guide them and all that. We've empowered you as our students, guide them through their journeys. So that's the I think the future of what I'm going to hopefully continue seeing is breaking that cycle.
That one of the things that a research question in my engagement with community members from a research perspective is, can engaging in this kind of participatory practice of being collaborative increase empowerment? And some student not that long ago on my research teams said, I think, we're your own research project, right? Like, you're trying to enhance our empowerment as well. And, I felt outed in terms of my secret agenda. But yeah, I think that's a critical component. So as I was, describing with people who are now in their 50s and 40s at this point, my early students, it's nice to see that they are themselves kind of carrying on the tradition of working with others and empowering others to be involved. I have former students who are now vice presidents at our institution. I always figure, I'll teach you now, and someday I'll have to work for you. So, that's just the reality of my opportunities. I'm sort of secretly thinking that Ivan's really asking me about, this question about all of us, because none of you are retiring anytime soon. He's trying to give me a message, I think. So I have this fantasy that someday, there'll be a network of people literally nationwide that I had something to do with. They had most of what they did, and that they'll be impacting others and they'll be helping to change the world. But I also, partly I've been going kicking and screaming towards retirement because I love what I do and I can't see myself not doing it. But I'm starting to get an idea of there are things I can continue to do with regard to the kind of community engagement things that I do, both in San Bernardino, in Claremont, where I live, which is a very different and perhaps not so needy kind of community compared to San Bernardino. But there's important messages to get out to people. Just because I don't get paid for what I do these days doesn't mean I can't keep doing it once I'm retired. So I have that in the horizon to remember that I don't have to stop being a mentor to people just because I'm done working.
So now that the panel is coming to a close, I'd like to open it up and see if you guys have any final words for our viewers at home.
Off, if you're watching this recording, then you are giving yourself a great gift of knowledge and amazing tools. So no matter where you are in life and academically, just know that you're always going to find a group of individuals or program that will always root for you. Because as educators, we don't do this because we earn the big bucks. We are in it because we're invested in human empowerment and just education in general. And that in itself is priceless for us. And so we are excited for whatever journey you decide to board on. And just remember that wherever you go, whatever steps you take, just go talk to someone, reach out. And if this was not a pandemic, like I tell my students, if there's food, go to that place. So once we resume our campus services, go to any event that has food, because food talks and people gather around that food. And sometimes you get the most enrichment conversations, and you build your network, and that network is going to follow you hopefully throughout your life in all these different chapters of it. So congratulations on whatever steps you decide to move forward on, and just remember, you could do it. Sí se puede.
I would advise students to assess what communities they belong to. So what I mean by that is, if you're a first generation college student, if you're a veteran, if you are an undocumented student, identify that and know that there is probably a program or support service on the campus that you're going to either be attending or are attending, and be part of that program. And if there isn't a program or service, then create one, especially because there is a lot of opportunity for involvement at the different forms of institution. Here at this panel, we are representing Cal State system and the community college system, but across the board there are services and resources. So I would say that would be my biggest takeaway, is identify the communities that you represent, that you identify with, and then find a resource or support program, a club even, that supports that initiative, that community. So but you have to really look for that information, and especially during pandemic times right now, a lot of the things should be online. And again, if there isn't one, then you can create one, and that could be even starting a club, a student club, where you bring folks, students, other students with the same common interests, common goal, and then you can even start off as a club if that's could be your starting point. But I know specifically at Mount SAC, we have different programs and services that help different populations of students. So I would say first look at what communities you belong to, and then go look for those services, and good luck.
Echo what I've heard. I think that there are many programs for many people, and in fact sometimes people might not meet any criteria for any program, but find people who are like-minded and who are, because I think everyone needs support. That's the absolute. This is not an easy journey for anybody, and so I think that make sure that you find people who are willing to be your advocate, be your supporter, um, and and believe in yourself. I think that's the most critical thing. And don't let people tell you you can't do that, because you can. Um, it may end up looking a little differently than you originally anticipated, but if you believe in yourself and you find others who are willing to believe in you, you're going to go far in this world. So good luck to all of you out there.
Thank you for being a part of this panel, and to the viewers at home, we hope you enjoyed this program and hope you get to enjoy future programs brought to you by Book to Action and the Glen Avon Library. Thank you.